trying to be a writer, and she comes home to boring Oregon and has to get a mentor to be able to get back into school. And so this is the scene where she first meets her mentor, her very eccentric mentor. Okay, the door is ajar. Since it's already open, I crack it open farther. Whoa, I whisper to myself. Shelves of books, stacks of paper, art pieces lining the walls, and houseplants crawling into crevices. On one wall, there's a giant oil painting of a woman with 3 heads. Hello, I say. No answer. The room smells of old wood and cigarette smoke, not a terribly appealing combination. An incense stick burns on the table, and what's that other smell? It's faint, but I walk through a slider door to a glass-covered patio. There sits an old woman in a wheelchair, gray hair slicked into a pixie cut with a pristine part, the silver strands shining in the sunlight like tinsel. She wears giant black-rimmed sunglasses a la Jackie Kennedy and an all-black fleece culotte with gold metallic embroidery at the sleeves and a matching belt. There's a bird on her shoulder and a joint in her mouth. Hello, I say. No answer. The red, blue, and yellow bird twitches his neck back and forth like he's questioning me. I take a few steps forward and wait for movement. The joint's still burning and there's a pile of ashes on her sleeve. I lean in closer. Is she dead? I say. Is she dead? Squawks the bird. I pull the joint from her mouth. It sticks to her dry lip and I have to yank to separate it. I feel breath on my hands, so she's at least partly alive. I lower her glasses and see her eyes closed, her false, long black eyelashes looking like smiley faces. Hello, I whisper, a little louder this time. Hello, the bird says, followed by kak-kak-kak-kak. I jump up and rub my eardrum still stinging from the high-pitched screech that doesn't even budge the old lady, who is quite fashionable, by the way. I notice her black sandals and fire engine red nails. Suddenly, the bird begins pecking wildly at her cheek and nibbling on her ear. The woman creaks open one eye and leans her head back to look up at me, a scowl across her face. Where's my grass? She asks me. I hand her the nub of the joint. You know you could have gone up in flames. The bird keeps watch, all is well. She sits and widens her eyes, stretching her mouth and adjusting in her seat. I watch her giant pupils look around, trying to get their bearings. I'm Gavinia, Bertie Montgomery sent me. Nice to know you, Gavinia. I'm Ruthie. This here is Alejandro. She points to the bird. Alejandro! After a Latin lover I had a few years ago. What a sexy beast. She looks up at me. The man, not the bird. Of course. How long have you had him? I don't have him, darling. He chose me. I nod and smile politely, knowing that I'll be hightailing it out of here as soon as the old bat agrees to work with me. She's mad as toast, Mom would say. Time for Alejandro to do his business, she rolls across the room. Do his business, I repeat. Ruthie takes a big swig from a martini glass. Right then, she says. She holds a finger out and Alejandro jumps his little claws on it. She hovers her hand with the outstretched pointer finger over a trash can. Sipping the rest of the martini in her other hand, she steadies the bird and turns her face away. Does he need privacy, I ask? I don't know how you take a shit, Gavinia, but nobody needs an audience. I turn sideways and shake my head. I glance over my shoulder to see the bird lift up his long red feathers behind him and green bird droppings land in the trash can. You potty-trained a bird. He's sophisticated, she says. I scan my eyes over the Chinese tea set and Roman sculpture in the corner that's taller than I am. Then I see a painting of Hitler, naked, nursing a baby Napoleon. Shocked and confused, I step back. Ruthie rolls up to me. It's not terribly offensive, I say. Art is meant to push boundaries, darling. Great art, anyways. She lights up a cigar and leans back in her wheelchair, looking at me intensely. My Barnard professors wanted me to find a mentor, I begin. She turns her head up towards the ceiling and blows rings of smoke. I understand you used to be a writer, I continue. She does not look at me. It would mean meeting with me every week, reading through my work and speaking with my director. She still does not look at me. I have to get a lot done this summer. Eyes directed out to her garden, she says, one does not become, aspire to be, or no longer practices being a writer. One is a writer. Oh dear, one of these types. I've encountered many of them in New York. Existential, bored, disconnected, and usually high. It's like they came into this world not as a baby, but as a fully clothed little human smoking and judging you. Right, I continue. If you would be willing to help me, I'd be very grateful. She finally looks at me, waving her cigar in the air. In a figure 8, she says, why? Why what? I shrug my shoulders. Why, she asks, slower this time. Why do I want to be a writer, or why do I want to go back to Barnard? Those are two very different questions with two very different answers, she says. I let out a long sigh. Alejandro stares at me, waiting for a response. Why should you help me? I ask. She shrugs, places her sunglasses back on. I don't know the answer to that. In fact, I don't know the answer to anything. I'm pretty sure Alejandro here knows more than I do about life, love, success, and well, everything else. I'm here because I need help. Well, you got into Barnard, that's something. Why the difficulty? It's just a little writer's block, I say. You're going to have to figure the answer to that, as you're going to have to figure out the answer as to why you have it. If I knew the answer to that question, I wouldn't be here talking to Alejandro and his chosen one. That's cute, so you can be funny, that's good. I can also be snide. You don't say. She takes another puff of her cigar. She reminds me of the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland. You know, Barnard is quite competitive. You don't know the half of it. Yes, I reply. It's okay if you're in over your head. I am not in over my head. All right then, did a boy break your heart? Right, because if a girl is having a hard time, it must be because of a boy. Darling, you're speaking to one of Brooklyn's foremost feminists. I presume nothing, she says. Why are you asking me all these questions? I just need help with my writing. Because you can't figure out one without the other, she says. Well, I don't need to be psychoanalyzed. I'll be on my way now. I've had enough pot smoke and breastfeeding dictators for one afternoon. I begin walking away, fuming. Oh, I'll help you, Gavinia. I stop moving, but you're gonna have to be honest with yourself. The only way to be a great writer is to get a little uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable my whole life, I say. Good, makes for interesting stories. Alejandro puts his beak up to the smoke that Ruthie exhales and then warbles in glee. Why are you still in a wheelchair, I ask? It's been months, right? She adjusts her glasses. Turning her head from me, she says, it hurts too much. Sounds to me like you're gonna have to get a little uncomfortable, I say. A pause. I listen to the fountain outside the window gurgling water. After a few moments, she says, Friday then? Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, good job. All right. So without further ado, I think we're just going to get right into Denice Lewis here. Denice is an award-winning, self-published author of books for kids and young adults, specializing in fantasy. She's also a professional screenwriter. She loves the challenge of writing and formatting in many different forms: books, poetry, screenplays, and plays. You can check out her website, DeniceHughes-Lewis.com, and you can find that on the Central Oregon Writers Guild website. Denice has also been the treasurer of Central Oregon Writers Guild for a little while now. Yeah. She's the one who's in charge of. She's in charge of our vast sums of cash that we have, right? Denice also teaches up at COCC. She teaches screenwriting courses, and I'm just going to let you take it away, Denice.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I'm so happy to see all of you. Thank you for supporting us and being here. And I think Mike's going to give you my email if you have any questions or anything you want to find out after this is all over with. So feel free to email me and ask me anything you want to know. As humans, we've been telling stories from the beginning of our existence. I like to imagine it even before we began to talk, that we did ancient, charades to explain what our adventures and what our day was like. Jean Houston is a PhD scholar, world-renowned spiritual teacher, and author of more than 30 books. This is what she has to say on the subject of story. Stories are living and dynamic. Stories exist to be exchanged. They are the currency of human growth. As a screenwriter and self-published author, I'd like to share 10 screenwriting tips that can help with any kind of writing. These are worthy of separate classes, and I'm going to be rushing through them. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, but I'll give you as much information as I can in a very short time, and then we'll all be ready for questions afterwards. Screenwriting is different from other kinds of writing in these main ways. 80% is visual. Images on the screen are easy to see and to feel. A screenplay, also called a script, has an entirely different formatting structure. A good screenplay is written to be read as fast as possible, unlike novels. Actors portray characters with action and dialogue. Writing is the beginning of the experience of a screenwriter. Thousands take part in the production process. It's not an author working with an editor and publisher. So you have to have a really thick skin if you want to succeed in the business of screenwriting, because you're just the first step. And I just heard a story about a professional screenwriter who was paid to rewrite 3 times. And he was asked, how many times did you write before you started getting paid? And this is still working with a producer, and he said 17. So if you want to be in the business, you have to be willing to do the work and give away a lot of it for free because of where it's going to get you. Scripts are written in present tense only, with emphasis on action verbs. Full sentences aren't always necessary. Unless there is an actor's voice you hear, which is called a voice-over, you don't write what a character thinks. Screenwriting is the same as other writing in these ways. You need a good story, a beginning, a middle, and end, not necessarily in that order. Description and action play an important part in setting the scenes and chapters. Characters with unique character traits, I call them core traits, inhabit a story, hopefully in an emotional way to engage the viewer or the reader. Both kinds of writing use themes to present authors' views and reasons for writing a particular piece. And it's better to show more and tell less. So here we go. Screenwriting tip number 1, entertain your readers. Walt Disney said, I would rather entertain and hope that people learn something than educate and hope that people were entertained. The main goal of screenwriters is to entertain. No one watches a movie with the idea that it's going to be a chore. We're able to watch, read, listen to a bombardment of information and delete it with the push of a button. So it's more important than ever to keep in mind that writing needs to entertain in some way. I'm not saying that it can inform and teach and change the world, but as human beings, we need a good story to elevate mankind. And if you entertain, you have a better chance of getting to the heart of people. Engage your readers' emotions is great screenwriting tip number 2. You go to movies and read books to have emotional experiences, to relate characters and their problems to your own life, to learn, to experience a different kind of life or place, hopefully to grow. But if you don't make your reader or viewer feel, they'll walk out of the theater or close the book. I recommend this book, The Emotional Craft of Fiction by Donald Mass. It will be in the information that you can look up online. And I'd like to read a quote from his book. Readers want an emotional experience. They want to feel something, not about the story, but about themselves. While reading, they want a sense of play. They want to anticipate, guess, think, and judge. True, but they also want to emerge from a story feeling competent, like they have been through something. More important, they want to feel as if they connected with a story's character, living their fictional experience, creating as if experience takes more than just walking readers through the plot. Readers retain a story only when they have felt it. An excellent book. I recommend it to any writer. Screenwriting tip number 3, create a unique concept. High concept is a magic word in the film industry. If you have one, the film can be watched by the 4 quadrants of moviegoers, males and females under 25, males and females over 25. Not all movies fit in that category, and that's why the 4 quadrant movies usually are the big blockbusting movies. They make millions of dollars and hopefully can affect millions of lives. I understand that most other kinds of writings don't need a high concept. My caveat is that you need to write something in a different way if you want to appeal to those readers for whom you're writing. For example, I sometimes watch the Hallmark Channel. I mean, maybe you don't. And because I know exactly what I'm going to see when I watch it. But if I want to be intrigued or scared or actually have to think, I'm going to watch something else. So don't write a cookie cutter book if you want to attract the publisher. Hone in on the specific concepts, the themes, and the characters in your genre that will make your writing stand out. And you need to know your story so well that you can explain the concept in one sentence. In screenwriting, it's called a log line. Here's a log line from and a concept of the film Hacksaw Ridge. A soldier who refuses to carry a gun becomes the biggest hero in one of the most important battles of World War II. What this line succeeds in doing is giving you a whole overview of what the movie is going to be about. It doesn't give you all the details, but it gives you what's important and what you're going to see. And that's what you need to be able to do when you want to talk about your book, talk about your screenplay, whatever. You need to be able to say it succinctly so that you get to the point and people can see and feel what you're going to be writing. Screen tip number 4 is to know your structure. Your writing needs to have a recognizable structure, at least in the beginning stages of writing. It helps you organize the concept, the plot, the themes, the chapters, the settings, keep your characters organized. You need to start on a road with a specific destination in mind. Too often, writers who don't have a structure find themselves bogged down in the middle of the story or the middle of a script with no place to go. They may not know the ending, but they just don't know how to get there. Find a system that works for you. There are a lot of them out there. Once you have the first draft of your book, you can rearrange your structure and do whatever you want with it to make it work better if it isn't working as well as you want. I use screenwriting techniques to better organize my books. Here's a 3-act structure. Blake Snyder wrote 3 books on screenwriting. He organized his scripts into what is called a 15-point beat sheet. This includes the 15 places in a script that affect or change the journey of the protagonist at specific times for the greatest emotional impact. It can be easily adapted for novels. His 15-point beat sheet goes on the idea of 110 pages of a script. But so on page 5, it's if this is where he thinks that the theme should be approximately. In a 300-page book, you can figure it out with simple math to know where your theme of your story should be. This is the 3rd book that I recommend everybody read if they want to know about important things that I'm going to tell you about in a minute. This is his 3rd book, Save the Cat Strikes Back. This is what he wrote after he lectured all over the world with his first screenwriting book. The second one is he takes apart 20 different screenplays in his genres. So he can have a horror script with a comedy script, but if it fits his idea of the genres that he's talking about in his book, that's what's in the 2nd book. This is a very important book because he's got the neatest things and it's so fun to read. And unfortunately, he died a few years ago in his 50s, and now we no longer have him except for his books. Okay, here's his structure for the 15 points. You have an opening image. This is important even when you're writing a book. You have to capture the interest of your reader or viewer immediately. The theme has to be stated within the first 5 pages of a screenplay, depending on how long your book is. That would be adjustable. Then you have the setup of the story, which is the way that you see the characters before anything happens to them, what their regular life is like, let's see, I should say the stasis equals death moment. This is the place they are where they're not willing to change, they haven't changed yet, and they're just gonna die if they stay this way without changing. Then you have a catalyst. This is the thing that starts everything in motion, the thing that starts your character on his road to discovery and to his arc. Then you have the debate. This is like, okay, should I do this or shouldn't I do this? Maybe I shouldn't. It's safer to stay home. And so you would see maybe your character at home, at work, at play. And that would be, he would be debating, or she, with whether they should go on this journey or not. Then he has what you call step number 6 is break into 2, which means break into act 2. This is when your character has taken the step, he's going to go into a different world. The B story comes next, and the B story is usually a love story, and it doesn't have to be romantic love. It can be between buddies, between friends, between anybody. But it usually comes at that point in the story. In a screenplay, it's around page 30. Then you have what he calls the fun and games. Now, it doesn't mean in a horror story this is fun, But these are the trailer moments. If you had a screenplay and you were going to put it on, this is what you would get people interested in. So the fun and games is everything that your characters are going to go through on their journey to change. Then you have the midpoint of your story, or the midpoint would be the middle of your book, where your character actually has decided, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm doing it. I tried it out. I've got to do it. Then you have the bad guys close in on step number 10. And then on step number 11, it's the all is lost moment, where, like, for example, in the movie Elf, where he's on the balcony, not knowing whether he wants to jump off or not, whether his life is worth it. That's the all is lost moment. And also it combines with the dark night of the soul, which is a part where there's nothing left but to go inside and draw from your inner self to know how to solve your problems. Then the next step is to break into 3, which is breaking into Act 3. Or the third, in a book, it would be the resolution, the climax of your story 2. Then you have the finale. And in his book number 3, he actually explains the finale in 5 steps, which he didn't in his first book. And it's very good to know what they are, because it helps you plan your climax and how every step of the way, and it makes it easier to write that. And then you have the final image. So those are the 15 steps that make it a lot easier to plan and write your book. He's not the only one that does a 3-act structure. You can find a lot of people online. Chris Soth has a mini movie method, and he divides his movie into 8 parts instead of 3. But they can be applicable to your writing and make it even a complicated story easier to understand, the way he breaks it up. John Truby Studio has a master storytelling course for screenwriters and novelists, and he has novelists who are best-selling novelists that can be, they're on premise and organization in the specific ways he does it. So those are all accessed, they're all in your resources that I've given you. Hal Crosman at Screenwriting U has in-depth classes on subtext, comedy, dialogue, just to name a few. You can take classes that last a whole year or more on advanced courses. But if you want to dial in, like, say, you want to really know about how to write subtext, you can't find better information than taking that class, even if you're not a screenwriter. So step number 5, tip number 5, description that shines. In a screenplay, description is one of the main elements necessary. In as little as 1 to 3 lines, the location is described with as much information and feeling as possible in as few words as possible. That's what makes it an art form, and that's what makes it so difficult to write a screenplay. You want your readers to identify and empathize with your characters by description, action, and dialogue. Don't spell everything out in mind-numbing detail. Trust your audience is smart enough to pick up on subtle clues. A book needs to be easily visualized. So description is important. And luckily, as writers of novels, you have a lot more leeway and a lot longer to get the point across or the description across than you do in a screenplay. Here's a screenwriting description example by me. It's easier to use mine than I'd have to worry about anybody else's rights. So just close your eyes and read this. I'm reading it as a screenplay first. Exterior, lake, Oregon wilderness, night. Mountains hover over moonlit water. Crickets and frogs compete in nightly song. Crawdad fox, 50s, crouches waist deep in the lake. Weathered, wily, a man one with nature. His hands slice into the water, fling a trout to the shore. Night songs cut off. Crawdad stiffens, swivels his head, eyes dart to the dark forest. An inhuman shriek pierces the night. All totally description, hopefully enough where you could picture it and maybe feel what's going on. So I wrote it in as an example for fiction to show you the difference between writing with words and then cutting your words afterwards. So here goes. Crickets and frogs were singing with their nightly songs. Crawdad fox was standing in the lake, moonlight shimmering silver on his weathered face. He almost looked like he was a part of nature, as still as the windless forest. His hands disappeared in the lake and threw a trout to the shore. The night noises stopped suddenly. Crawdad lifted his head and stared into the dark trees. An inhuman shriek pierced the silence. Okay, that's 73 words. But as an editor, I can't help but go back and look at those because you don't need helping verbs. The is, are, doing this, was, that, all those words. You don't need as many adjectives as you think or as many adverbs that aren't necessary. So the first thing I read you was 73 words. The one I'm going to read you now is 60 words. So I've cut out 13 words. Crickets and frogs compete in nightly song. Crawdad Fox crouched in the lake, moonlight silver on his weathered face, a part of nature, still as the windless forest. His hands sliced through water and flung a trout to shore. All noise ceased. Crawdad stiffened. Primal instinct drew his fearful eyes to the dark trees. An inhuman shriek pierced the silence. So when you're writing, pay attention to your action verbs. Pay attention to the verbs, to the words that make you see and feel more. In your exposition, be careful how you use it. The backstory or details of the plot, use them to the best advantage. Don't just put them all in a paragraph and expect everybody to understand or even be interested in reading that. They're liable to skip down to see what happens next. But you can separate exposition and information in between action and in between dialogue and what your character's doing it. So you kind of bury it, but it's easier to take that way. It's easier to explain. It's easier to write, and it's easier to understand. An example is what Blake Snyder calls the Pope in the pool. There's an exposition where people are coming in, asking him questions. But what's interesting and what hides the exposition is the fact that the Pope is swimming. Now, who thinks of a Pope swimming in a pool? That just distracts you from what you're learning in the exposition. And that's a way of doing it with what he calls the Pope in the pool. Screenwriting tip number 6, unique characters. In a screenplay, every word a character says, every word that is said about a character, and every action a character takes needs to reflect who he or she is. Movies have the advantage of actors to portray characters. Other writers, except playwrights, have the challenge of creating their images only with words, and that makes it tougher. You have to be very selective in the words that you use. Develop characters that have emotional interest and connection to readers. Make them three-dimensional, even the bad guys. After all, bad guys are heroes in their own stories. Use hope and fear for your characters to keep the reader on an emotional roller coaster and glued to the story. Watch any good movie to see this technique in action. Some writers create detailed histories to form their characters, and some don't. I used one page as reference so that I can find out exactly what I want immediately without looking at 50 pages worth of character description and information, especially when I'm in the beginning of writing. I know everything is subject to change, and my characters will grow and tell me their stories as I write. The most important thing is to find the core of your characters. Be precise. You should be able to predict a lot of things about your characters' actions and decisions, but give them only 4 core traits. And don't make them all positive. Nobody's perfect. Here's an example of a character sheet for one of my scripts. The character's name is Eaton Hunter. Her characteristics, and characteristics are not character traits. They're just what physically has to do with a character. So she's blonde, stacked, model perfect, and in her middle 20s. But her traits are, she's independent, intelligent, closed-minded, and jaded. She wants to find her parents' killer. She needs to allow someone into her heart. Her flaw is that she believes in her self-sufficiency. What's special about the character? She's Mensa smart. Her log line, or her reason, her part in a screenplay, she's a DNA scientist professor who must discover who's killing scientists without any body or evidence. Her arc is that she's fiercely independent, but she changes to finding out the benefits of companionship and love. Her fear is being alone. Her wound is that her parents are dead. Her secret is she fears viral infection. The main issue in her life is she's competitive as hell. Her subtext is, and this is what she doesn't show to people, what's only underneath, she avoids getting close to anyone. She values martial arts and intelligence. Anything else that's important? She dresses for the kind of attention she doesn't want, reinforcing her belief that she's superior to slobs who notice. You can get this information on one page, and it helps when you're referring, when you're using it for reference. Or you can write a big long one, and that's okay too. Whatever works for you is what you need to use. You hear a lot about knowing and using archetypes and mythical characters. Here are 2 books that can help inspire your writing and take your characters to a higher level. This one is called 45 Master Characters, Mythic Models for Creating Original Characters. I'll just read you a little bit about so she creates female heroes and villains. Like, for an example, Aphrodite is the muse, the seductive muse, and the female fatale. Then she has 7 female heroes and villains. She has a few more males and supporting characters, and then she tells you about their journeys. So this way you can find out exactly what kind of archetypes these are and develop your characters with some of these. The other really good book is called The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogel, Mythic Structure for Writers. And he talks about the archetypes too in a little different way. I want to get on there. So mapping out the journey of your characters, practical guide. And then he talks about the hero, the mentor, the threshold guardian, herald, shapeshifter, shadow, trickster. All these people can take part and be part of the characters in your books or your screenplays. And then he talks about the stages of the journey. Great book. Important because it seems like more and more stories are being written from the background of mythical characters, because that's our basics. That's where we started. Okay. Here are 4 strategies that help in defining characters from Hal Krosman, president of Screenwriting U. It's helpful if you have their world view, if you know what metaphors they live their life from, what rules and strategies they have, and what justifications they have for who they are. Here's my example. As my heroine is Annabelle. She's a graduate student in psychology. Her world view is you can't trust anyone. Her metaphor is life is like a closet. Rules and strategies she lives by: she avoids relationships, she lies, she uses brains and beauty to achieve her goals. Her justification is everyone takes advantage, why not me? This information leaves all kinds of questions as to why Annabelle is the way she is. What made her this way? Screenwriting tool number 7, dialogue tools. Dialogue is a tool for many purposes. It sounds natural, but it isn't. It should show more than it tells. It delivers on many levels through metaphor, misdirection, conflict, subtext, even silence. It defines character. It engages our interest in the story. Here are a few interest techniques from Hal Krosman. Dialogue sets something up and it pays something off. It provides other meanings. Dialogue highlights something that needs to be in the foreground or foreshadows something that's going to happen. Dialogue represents the core traits of your character. Remember I said you need 4. And it helps if you have conflicting traits for your other characters. So that gives you conflict in your story. If you select precise core traits, you'll know your characters and it will be easier to create meaningful dialogue. But don't use cliches or on-the-nose dialogue. On-the-nose dialogue is writing exactly what a character thinks or feels. You'd be surprised how much we, as viewers of movies, how much we understand subtext on an unconscious level, just by the way an actor acts, what he says, but it's a lot trickier to put it on the page. If you're having trouble in any line of dialogue, rewrite the line 10 to 50 times. in a different way that's true to the meaning and to your character's trait. You'll be surprised at the perfect line you'll create. You can write it if the character is angry, sad, upset, sick, just to get you on the road to practicing doing that, and then you will find the best line for dialogue. Screenwriting tip number 8, subtext in dialogue and action. Subtext is a term loved by those in film. Its purpose is to take your characters and take you on an internal journey, not by trying to trick the reader, but by giving him a deeper meaning. Subtext is what isn't being said by your characters, what they conceal, how they manipulate, why they lie. Plots that help subtext can be ironic, layered, fish out of water, hidden identities. Here's a simple subtext line. Wesley in The Princess Bride says to Buttercup, "As you wish." The grandfather who's telling the story also tells his grandson, "As you wish." But the subtext meaning is, "I love you." But what a neater way to say it. Watch The American President or A Few Good Men by Aaron Sorkin, a master of dialogue and subtext. As viewers, we automatically understand it, but like I said, it's a challenge to create. Here are 5 ways a girl can say no to a boy when he asks her out on a date that reflects one of her character traits. Practice doing this with your characters and situations. So here's one character trait, and the girl is sarcastic. "Oh my God, you got to be kidding." Not only is it sarcastic, but it's cliche. "Oh my God, how many times have you heard that? You've got to be kidding, how many times have you heard that?" Find a better way to do it. You can have colorful or poetic language. As a sarcastic character, she might say, "I'd rather date a skunk." But a subtext sentence might say, "Doesn't your father work for mine?" Now, if you notice with subtext how it takes your mind further, it's like, okay, now what does her father do? What does his father do? Is she a snob? Do they have a lot of money? It just makes your mind go farther. And your job as a writer is to make your subtext lead the reader where you want him to go. Here's an abrasive trait, also a cliched sentence: "Get lost." Colorful or poetic might be, "Sandpaper would be more fun." Here's a subtext: "Give me a list of your ex-girlfriends first." What kind of a girl is this? See what subtext can do for your stories. But rather than always be abrasive, how about a shy trait? "Oh, I couldn't possibly." Colorful or poetic language: "Trifle not with a fragile heart." Subtext: "Oh, it would be too dangerous." Now, why on earth would it be too dangerous? What is she? Who is she? What's she going to do to you? Here's a combative trait: "Why would I date you?" Colorful or poetic: "Sanity is preferable." Subtext: "Well, only if you've got a black belt." Do you see where it takes your mind farther than just the words? Here's the last example, a complimentary trait: "Oh, you're much too popular." Colorful or poetic: "Mere mortals don't date gods." Subtext: "Oh, I would spoil those beautiful lips." What is she, a vampire? You don't know. That's what subtext can do for your book or your screenplay. The key parts to subtext, again, according to Mr. Crosman, you have actual text and action, a deeper meaning, and how you're going to reveal the deeper meaning to your reader. There are all kinds of cover-ups that help you with subtext, like silence. A person might change the subject. They might ask a question instead of answering. They might attack the person. They might compliment them. They might distract them. They might make a joke or ignore and continue the conversation. Subtext directs the reader's mind toward a specific interpretation. It points to something under the surface, causing wonder, jumping to conclusions, rethinking assumptions about character and story. You can use metaphor, implication, insinuation, hints, sarcasm. You can do this in your writing. It takes practice. As I mentioned before, I didn't mention before, but there's a whole course that Hal gives on writing subtext, and I think it's like $49. I'm telling you, it's worth it. And I don't make any money from that. I've been taking classes from him, and he gives so much information. You can also look online and find out what subtext is for free. Number 9 tip, screen tip, the value of openings and closings. This is the time to hook your reader or viewer into wanting to continue with a story. You can start with conflict, danger, action, shock, description, dialogue, an intriguing scene, unique character, a twist. The choices are endless, but you need to make your opening fresh. You need to make it fit your story, and you need to have it create questions that continue through the story. I'm going to read you the beginning. Where's my book? Where are you? Ah, too many books. This is from The Emotional Craft of Fiction. It's just the beginning of a book. And it's not very many words either, but it tells you a lot. This is from the book, Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games. When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had a bad dream and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. Whoa, what's the reaping? What's the nightmare? What do you know about that just from what it says? You know that the character that's talking and telling the story, who is Katniss, you know she loves her sister. There's something really bad happening, and she has heart. That's an opening. You have to catch your readers. Mostly, I guess, if you're going to be a published author, you know, with a publisher, you need to catch their attention or whoever's reading it for them. Because an opening is the only chance you have to make a first impression. By using clarity, focusing your attention, creating vivid details, using a hook, you connect the reader to your character in the first moments. It's the emotional starting point to a compelling character and story. Endings must be satisfying and resolve the main conflict. It helps if they're surprising, but inevitable and organic to the story. 3 types of closing, obviously, are happy, tragic, or ironic. Choose what's appropriate for your story. Be extreme in an emotional way. Remember, it's the thoughts and feelings that you want your audience or reader to feel and to be left with. The last tip, at least tonight, is wordsmithing. Wordsmithing is the last thing a screenwriter does before getting feedback from other writers or coverage from a professional. Admittedly, this takes time. A screenplay is from 90 to 120 pages, each page a minute of screen time. Novels take much more time to wordsmith, but it can be fun and it can be an exciting way to elevate your writing. Here are the steps. You reread every line for spelling, grammar, tone, emotion, necessity, clarification, meaning, and brevity if you need that scene to move faster. But don't get overwhelmed, one sentence at a time. Wordsmith the voice of your character. Choose one main character and read all of her lines. Check to be sure what she says or does is consistent with her character sheet. Do this on separate days with each character. It's easier to be true to that character by isolating his action and dialogue. No one said writing was going to be easy. It takes time, perseverance, passion, a thick skin, and a love of words. I would like to say a word about story. A story needs plot, conflict, and character growth. Remember, how you write makes a difference. Words are magic and can elicit a picture in the mind of your reader or an emotion in his heart. Robert McKee teaches courses all over the world to screenwriters. His book, Story, is a star in its field. I highly recommend it to any writer. If you want to actually blow your minds, Stealing Fire from the Gods, a complete guide to story for writers and filmmakers by James, I don't know how he says his name, whether it's Bonnet or Bonnet. This is a 12-year in the making masterpiece where he went all the way back as far as you can go. This is a wonderful book. Stealing Fire from the Gods, recommended highly to anyone who writes books. And I'll leave you with a quote from his book. Great stories are created by powerful and mysterious inner forces. They are designed to guide us to our full potential and are as necessary to our well-being as fresh air. Understanding great stories means understanding these inner processes, and understanding these inner processes can lead to a profound understanding of ourselves and the world. To your greater understanding, I thank you for being here with me tonight, and I thank Mike and Mary and Kerry also, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Denice.
You're welcome.
That was great. So just as a reminder, there's a couple of questions about this. So I'm going to do another screen share of our website and show you where some of this stuff is, okay? Some of the things that she went over. So on the, this is centraloregonwritersguild.com, and it's the landing page, meetings and events. And there's a beautiful picture of Denice. And here are the, this is basically the script of what she read tonight. These are the resources. So somebody asked about the list of books. They're in that, so you just click on that. That beat sheet is here. Mary asked about an example of your character sheet. That's here too. And then there's just a description example here as well. Denice's website is in the About COWG. And we go down and see her beautiful face again, which is here. And there's her website. Okay. So that's where we can find all that information. And Denice is open for questions. So if you have a question, I think at this point, just unmute yourself and ask.
Who was the author for the book that you mentioned, Stealing Fire from the Gods?
James Bonnet, B-O-N-N-E-T. All the books are listed in the resources too, but that's his name, yeah. The Complete Guide to Story for Writers and Filmmakers. Any more questions?
I actually have one, Denice.
Okay.
So the on the Blake Snyder's beat sheet, you talked about the finale consisting of 5 steps.
Right.
Do you have access to those 5 steps?
Yes.
I'd love to kind of hear more detail about that.
Yes.
That's probably one of my biggest challenges, is that, as you'd mentioned, that sort of climax finale thing. So
Get the book or read the book, because it's really worth the way he describes it. If you have structured dilemmas, the first
I have the first book. So now I have to get that one too.
Yeah, but he didn't know how to do that until the third book.
Okay. All right.
So he started teaching classes all over the world, and then his students said, "Hey, wait a minute, I need this." So the first one is gathering the team. Because you have to storm the castle, you know, whatever the problem is. And then he explains that. The second one is executing the plan. The third one is the high tower surprise, because of course plans never work out the way you expect them to. The fourth step is dig down deep. That's the whole point of the finale revealed finally. This is where, how does he say it? It's the neatest
where you find your inner strength, sort of.
That's right. That's the one. Yeah. And then the last step is the execution of the new plan.
Okay.
But yeah, he has a lot of stuff in all the books. I mean, if you're a screenwriter, get the second book too. At least get the second and the third book. But if you're just a regular writer, this one has a lot of techniques, a lot of things that anybody can use in their writing.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Good question. I wrote all those down because I mean, I've read enough about this stuff before. So just knowing those 5 things, it's like, okay, I'm not sure I always get all 5 of those things in there.
Right, right.
So that's helpful.
Thank you. Well, he explains it better than just me giving you the list.
No, I know, but if you have some kind of background or whatever,
Yeah, if you know where to go.
about it, but just not include all of those things. So it's helpful to have the list.
Yeah, lists are helpful. Any more questions?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I really liked what you said about, I think you said, don't write dialogue on the nose. Is that at some point? I really like that idea. It's not something I've thought about before. So it's giving me some ideas.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad. Yeah, it's amazing how much we do that. And then we just can't because it's not exciting. It's not interesting. And you certainly don't like it if you're watching a movie because in a way, it's like, well, yeah, I get it. I got it before that because you can see and feel it. It's just so different.
Right.
That's why I think, actually writing, they're all art forms. They all have certain things for everything, but you have to put it all in words in a book. You don't have the actor interpreting it.
Right.
You only have you interpreting it. So you have to be the actor. And I would recommend any writer take an acting class because that will help you know how to write your characters.
Although I will say with subtext, it's like so many other things in writing, there's a balance. You can't have subtext for everything characters say, or it gets exhausting and confusing for the reader. And the kiss of death is confusing the reader.
That's true.
You want them to be curious and interested and know what's going to happen next. You don't want to confuse them. There's a big difference.
There is a difference. Thank you for pointing that out, Trish.
So yeah, but because the subtext was great for me too. You just put it in such a concise way. That was really helpful.
I appreciate the idea of rewriting dialogue 5, 10, or 50 times. I hate the idea of it, but I know that in some cases that's probably something that I should do.
It's interesting because I heard a story about a woman who did this, and it was a screenplay, and I think she did 50 of them. That particular sentence sold the film. It sold the screenplay because and she didn't even know she had it. I mean, you can write these things and they're just coming out and you write them down, and she didn't even recognize what she had until she went back to reread it. So it's a wonderful way of finding the best line.
Anybody else? Any questions or comments or?
See, I did it in less than 45 minutes, didn't I?
You nailed it. You nailed it. All right, so I'm going to hopefully post the recording of this onto YouTube on our Central Oregon Writers Guild YouTube channel, where you can find all those other things that I listed earlier as well. And we'll have
don't forget my email in case they want to ask me questions.
Okay. Yeah. And I put the email, I put her email and her website in the chat. So if anybody, you can pick that out of there. Those are in there earlier in the chat. Okay. Super great seeing people for real, as opposed to sending videos out into the mist here. We'll do another meeting the September 15th. We'll have David Edlund, and we're not sure exactly what his presentation is, but he's a best-selling local author, and we're excited to have him. So, and then again, we actually got some grant money from Deschutes County to get visiting writers to do workshops, and that's where that Taylor Kokok workshop is helping us, or helping us to fund that workshop. So, trying to bring some writers in from out of the area, at least, you know, Oregonians. So yeah, hang in. This will all end soon, and we'll all get back together, hopefully at the library. And I shouldn't say soon. This will all end, and we'll all get together in the library, right?
From Pfizer.
Right. Did you say we've got a cure?
No, I said
Um,
get all in when we have a vaccine, in my opinion.
yeah.
And
I'm with you.
dogs that spell out this virus. Isn't that a fantastic thing?
Yeah.
I think that's number one.
Are you here in Bend, Tom, or are you in?
It took us several months to get here.